October 31st coming up. Are you ready to decide if you're going to worship Satan or not? That's the question everybody seems to think Halloween is all about. If you're celebrating in any way, shape, or form anything on October 31st in the fashion and manner relative to our culture, you are worshiping Satan. Is that true? Is it partly true? Maybe some of it's true. Maybe it's not true. I'm finding myself constantly now engaged in these conversations, trying to unpack what is really consistent with our faith and what is not. And I find myself as almost like a side hustle, having to squash arguments about mindfulness, about yoga, about now Halloween. It's like, what, why is there a superstition that is so easily taken in by Catholics in our culture today? Exorcisms and exorcists and anything anybody thinks somebody said a friend of theirs heard from an exorcist becomes the norm for our understanding of Catholic spirituality and teaching. We've got to go deeper. The world needs us to go deeper. So I'm going to unpack a little bit here. I'm actually going to go through an article that I read from You Catholic, and there's a number of articles to choose from, but this is actually reposted from Catholic Parent, which is a magazine, and it's from a Dominican priest, Father Augustine Thompson. And generally speaking, the Dominicans are pretty orthodox. I don't know if you'd agree with me or not, but most of the Dominicans that I've met are pretty consistent in having deep dive studied the works of Thomas Aquinas, certainly the backbone and foundation of Catholic theology, and are fairly articulate and sophisticated in their approach to philosophy and theology and spirituality. And so I don't think you can go wrong as a starting point, and maybe you want to dig into some of these things. But when we start to unpack more of this argument or of this perspective, I think you're going to see that there's a lot here that we can maybe stretch our minds to understand a little bit and think, like, how did we get here? And then with something like Halloween, there is incredible beauty to be found, and there's incredible value. There are gold mines of riches to be mined in the cultural context, and there are things to be weary of and careful about. That's what we're going to unpack right now, and I think you may be surprised. You may be hopefully not confused, but you might have questions. You can always stick them down here in the chat box, and let me know what you're thinking. But let's go through this. So this is an article. I'm going to link it in the description. Catholic Origins of Halloween, and the sort of thesis here of Father Augustine is that the roots and origins of Halloween are very Christian. And so right off the bat, he knocks out this sort of narrative that I've seen also, that Halloween goes back to a Celtic Druid sort of pagan ritual and pagan celebration. And what he says is Halloween is a pagan rite dating back to some pre-Christian festival among the Celtic Druids that escaped church suppression. So says the allegation. But then he says, nothing could be further from the truth. The origins of Halloween are, in fact, very Christian and rather American. And then he reminds us that Halloween falls on October 31st because a pope and all of these observances were entered into through Catholic piety. So Halloween is a pious holiday. It is a really important thing to realize that. So he says that it's true that ancient Celts of Ireland and Britain celebrated a minor festival on October 31st, as they did on the last day of most other months of the year. So it's not like they had this one thing all year long, October 31st. It's like the normal cycle, very pagan. you're looking at the cycles of the moon and the harvests and all this stuff. Okay, so the 31st of the month, the last of the month, they have a celebration. Okay, that doesn't mean that's the origins of our Halloween. But then he says Halloween falls on the last day of October because of the solemnity of All Saints, of All Hallows on November 1st. So the hallowed. Now I remember thinking about this before, like as a younger Catholic, just sort of recognizing, okay, we have All Hallows Eve, or we have All Hallows, we have All Saints Day. And then the next day, November 2nd, they made All Souls Day. And I think it makes a lot of sense. First of all, we celebrate all the saints that have made it. And then we are celebrating all those who have passed away. And we are, sort of who are on the way, hopefully, to sainthood. But why? I was thinking like Halloween must be, it's a celebration of souls because there's so much emphasis on like spirits and the dead, but not with like the saints in mind. So I was like, why does Halloween get separated from All Souls Day? It's almost like the death of people that we hope are going to heaven sandwiches the middle, which is all the people that went to heaven. I don't know. This is the way I used to think about it. I never really considered why this celebration of or observance of spirits and ghosts, and maybe that's a derivative of somehow recognizing the people who have died. But why is it separated from All Souls Day? Doesn't it make more sense that it would be like the eve of All Souls, or even All Souls Day itself? So, anyways, we have Father Augustine here to clear that up for us and to explain exactly what was going on. But let's back up a second, because what's really interesting here is our current expression and understanding of Halloween is an expression of different cultures coming together in America. So this is really huge because we recently moved into an old house. It's an old house that you can see here in my video. Actually, I'll show you some more of my office. So this is my office, which was the old kitchen. That fireplace over there, this fireplace here, was the hearth of a kitchen that's actually 300 years old. And the beams and posts of this house are 300 years old. And so we had an awesome time bringing this old house back to life. This house was built by British citizens who came to this country before there was an American Revolution. And so this is very thick in the sort of atmosphere of our family now homeschooling. We do a lot of pre-revolutionary study, and I've been deep diving the letters of the founding fathers and different things like the Federalist Papers for a lot of different reasons why that's important right now. And all of this is happening, and this was the sort of atmosphere here in the country where different immigrants were coming in from different places and bringing with them their traditions. And America was this place of freedom. And, it's really interesting to study how, Catholics coming over from Britain, Catholics had no rights in Britain, in England. And then they got here and there was a lot of the same prejudice. So here in Connecticut, this was a colony that the Catholics were originally outlawed. We couldn't hold any sort of political positions, couldn't own land. There's a lot of stereotypes and different things. So that's the sort of milieu. Obviously, there were Catholic outposts and places where Catholics were allowed, and they found their way, and down in Maryland and in different places. But here we were Quaker, and there was different puritanical kind of Protestant sort of Christianity that was allowed here, but not Catholicism. So we have this melting pot, though, of all these different cultures coming together. So this article continues, and we start talking about how Pope Gregory was the one that moved the celebration of All Saints from, it used to be May 13th, and then Pope Gregory. I love all the popes. I love studying all the Pope Gregories. It's very narcissistic of me, but they're all great. Like, they really are awesome. Pope Gregory the Great, especially, but there's Gregory of Nyssa, and then the new one. Well, not popes, but saints as well. Saint Gregory of Narek, that Pope Francis just made a doctor of the church. It's always fun. I don't know. It's fun to find a connection there in one's own name. But anyways, Pope Gregory, this was Pope Gregory the Third, who was from the 8th century. He moved it to November 1st. And then this was to dedicate the chapel in Rome for All Saints. And then in the 840s, in the 9th century, Pope Gregory the Fourth made All Saints Day a universal observation to recognize all of the saints. And so then, of course, the evening before, just like Christmas Eve, is All Saints Eve, or All Hallows Eve. And that's why it's the night before November 1st that we celebrate the eve of the liturgical feast and celebration of all the saints. So there's a lot more there than if we look at the combination of the saints and then the souls who are on their way to sainthood but not yet there, which we say is purgatory. And so then there was All Souls Day added November 2nd. And so now there's a double whammy. We're going to cover all the bases. So there's feast for those in heaven, those for in purgatory, and then the article continues. What about those in the other place? It seems Irish Catholic peasants wondered about the unfortunate souls in hell. After all, if the souls in hell are left out when we celebrate those in heaven and purgatory, they might be unhappy enough to cause trouble. So it became customary to bang pots and pans on All Hallows Eve to let the damned know they were not forgotten. Thus, in Ireland at least, all the dead came to be remembered, even if the clergy were not terribly sympathetic to Halloween and never allowed All Damned Day into the church calendar. So even if Halloween has connection to a recognition of the souls who are damned, we cannot separate the context for what we're really actually saying here. It's like, we know that heaven is the goal. We know that we got to pray for all those who are on their way in purgatory. And we know that there's a spiritual battle being waged, and that we can be on guard, and that we can pray prayers of deliverance and protection, and we can be on guard. You know, it's like the scripture to stay sober and alert. The devil is prowling like a roaring lion to consume your soul. And it's like we want to recognize the alertness. So I love that the old Irish peasants clanging pots and pans, making a big racket. It's like we got our eyes on you if there are damned souls to be leery of, and we are going to do our job as church militant to stand guard. I think that's pretty beautiful. I think that's awesome. I think that's tremendous. It's beautiful, like Braveheart is beautiful. It's like there's the raw reality of being church militant, of standing guard, of being watchful, watchful. Actually, that's the etymology of the name Gregory. And watch. The watchman stands upon the gate and looks across to the horizon to see if the enemy is approaching. This is what we're called to. And if we really enter into that vocation, it's like let's claim a day for it. Let's call attention to it. It should be every day, but let's call attention to it on a particular day. Okay. So then we have banging of pots and pans from Ireland, and then we have France, which in the 14th and 15th century is where the dressing up comes from. Late medieval Europe was hit by repeated outbreaks of the bubonic plague, which was the Black Death. It lost half its population. And so then Catholics in France and rest of Europe became pretty concerned about the afterlife. More masses were said on All Souls Day. Artistic representations were devised to remind everyone of their own mortality. Now, this is a part that I really like because this is the Franciscan formation in me, but we all know the painting of St. Francis depicted holding a skull, and we know that Francis was always saying, remember your death. Memento Mori. That's St. Francis. And he always, and we also say, we also talk about the four last things. You know, or we think about heaven and hell and purgatory and suffering and the afterlife and the hope of heaven. And so we want to be able to deepen our appreciation for the continuity of the before death and after death experience of our humanity. Okay, there's continuity there. Build our treasure in heaven. We're supposed to still build treasure. Like, no, God's not telling us not to invest. God's telling us to invest in the whole plan and the continuity. You know, don't be so short-sighted to just invest in what's before the grave. Think long-term, all the way long-term, into eternity. So we have all these different ways we celebrate the people who got there. We're thinking about the path to get there in purgatory. And we are also aware of and on guard against the people who don't get there. All of those things are really important. And then we are remembering our death. And so in France, Black Plague, we have Black Death, we have the celebration of All Souls, and then they start to artistically represent those who are dying. And this is called the dance, or danse, it's in French, I guess, macabre, or the dance of death, which was commonly painted on the walls of cemeteries and shows the devil leading a daisy chain of people, popes, kings, ladies, knights, monks, peasants, lepers, into the tomb. Sometimes the dance was presented on All Souls Day itself as a living tableau with people dressed in the garb of various states of life. So here we now have the dressing up part. This was part of All Souls Day. It was a reminder of the fact that we die. Memento Mori, very Franciscan, very Christian. So and then it's participating in a kind of masquerade and making a living representation of going into our death. Keeping it front and center. We are going to die. So then we have the French dressing up on All Souls. We have the Irish having Halloween, but not dressing up, going around banging their pots and pans. And then they all come to America during the 1700s. Now we have the Irish and the French begin to intermarry. We have Irish focus on hell, and that gives the French masquerades a bit of a macabre twist. So this is where we're starting to see pieces coming together here. And then we have the last part, which is also really fascinating, where we have the trick or treat part. Like, what about going from house to house asking for treats? So Father Augustine enlightens us even further. We go back to England. During the penal period of the 1500s to the 1700s in England, Catholics had no rights, just like when they came over here to the U.S., to America. They could not hold office. They were subject to fines, jail, and heavy taxes. It was a capital offense to say Mass, and hundreds of priests were martyred. Occasionally, English Catholics resisted, sometimes foolishly. One of the most foolish acts of resistance was a plot to blow up the Protestant King James I and his parliament with gunpowder. I really love this little story because this is a side note, but the whole there's a whole online internet hacker sort of network of what's called Anonymous, and maybe you know of Anon or Anonymous, but they all like to the symbol of Anonymous is the Guy Fawkes mask, and so this is the history of Guy Fawkes. There was supposedly this plot to trigger a Catholic uprising. The ill-conceived gunpowder plot was foiled in 1605 when the man guarding the gunpowder, a reckless convert named Guy Fawkes, was captured and arrested. He was hanged. The plot fizzled. So it's really interesting. I'm not spending a lot of time on the dark web, but I've definitely, out of interest, looked up some things on Anonymous and Anon, and it's, a lot of times they get very, they're sort of across the board politically, but sometimes they can be very anti-Catholic, anti-church, anti-patriarchy, anti-rules, things like that. So it's really fascinating that the mascot and the sort of unifying, rallying character in history is a Catholic who wanted to blow up the Protestant Parliament. So again, I think if we look deeper into history and deeper into culture, deeper into the meanings of things, we will find really interesting connections and draw out ways that we can enter deeper into conversation and understand ourselves and our mission and our call a lot better. Same thing we're trying to do here with Halloween. Okay. So then November 5th became Guy Fawkes Day, which is a great celebration in England, as it is today. During the penal periods, bands of revelers would put on masks and visit local Catholics in the dead of night, demanding beer and cakes for their celebration. Trick or treat. That was the whole point. That was the beginning of trick or treat. Guy Fawkes Day arrived in the American colonies with the first English settlers, but by the time of the American Revolution, old King James and Guy Fawkes had pretty much been forgotten. Trick or treat, though, was too much fun to give up, so eventually it moved to October 31st, the day of the Irish-French masquerade. And then in America, trick or treat wasn't limited to Catholics. So we have this mixture. This is so cool. Mixture of various immigrant traditions we know as Halloween to become a fixture in the United States by the early 1800s. To this day, it remains unknown in Europe, even in the countries from which some of the customs originated. So, and this article was written in 2019. I think Halloween is actually it's gotten to be more well known in Europe now, but it's a uniquely American experience of a melange, a mixture, a mixing pot of culture, as we love to talk about here in America, and we should reverence that, and it's a beautiful thing of identity. We can hold together, solidarity and subsidiarity and diversity and true identity and all these different things. These are all very Catholic things. And so as we face down the culture in all sorts of arenas, I think we don't want to just give up on things that have deep Catholic roots. And also, even if they don't, we could put Catholic meaning into things where we can reclaim the truth, goodness, and beauty to be found everywhere. So then he talks about, answers the question about, what about the witches? What about all this extra stuff? And he says these are one of the last additions. It was the greeting card industry. Hallmark added them in the late 1800s. Halloween was already ghoulish, so why not give witches a place on greeting cards? The Halloween card failed, but the witches stayed. And then the jack-o'-lantern was added in, and then there was a thought that Halloween was druidic and pagan. Lamps made from turnips had been part of ancient Celtic harvest festivals, so they were translated to the American Halloween celebration and became the jack-o'-lantern. But that's not the origin. So do we want to just sit at like the fifth step of the development of Halloween and then react and reject the things that happened at step 5? Or do we want to go back to the actual beautiful, amazing, meaningful cultural significance of Halloween in its beginnings, especially as it's connected to All Saints Day and as it's connected to All Souls Day, as it's connected to remembering our death, as it's connected to our Christian vocations and the camaraderie and the social support and the celebration of life, ultimate life, eternal life. And when we get together as Catholics and with some beer and with some candy or some good food, and we also dress up and we maybe take part in these sort of cultural festivals and things like that. I'm not saying pagan, I'm saying cultural, and ways that we are just community and communio, and that we have friendship and we have joy. This is Catholic. It's Catholic to have joy. So this Halloween, we'll be dressing up our kids, and we're going to go to our friend's house, and we're going to have some drinks, and we're going to have maybe some dinner or some snacks, and then we go down and up and down the street, and we'll say trick or treat, And we are going to remember with fondness Guy Fawkes, who tried to blow up Parliament as a rebellion against Protestant oppression. And we're going to celebrate our life, thinking about our eternal life, raising a toast to the saints who have gone before us, praying for all of those who are on their way in purgatory, and praying those prayers of protection and submitting ourselves to the precious blood of Jesus, who protects us against all the evil spirits and the principles and principalities that this war is truly waging against. We are going to take back Halloween, and we are going to redeem it. Not even we don't even need to fully redeem it. We need to just erase step 5 where it got distorted and get back to the beginning to let it help us get to our end. God bless you.